All right, thanks everybody. I've been told I have to stand up here and give a comedy routine until you all sit down. So I'm really hoping you'll sit down sooner than later, because this could be pretty awkward for me. All right, I'm going to sit down and hopefully we can get started. I've got two great guests here to talk about league-led investing. I've got David Lee from NBA Investments. He is an SVP and the head of NBA Investments, corporate venture arm of the NBA, and has been leading the NBA's efforts to make strategic investments in promising partners that help the NBA innovate on and off the court. David previously co-founded two startup studios, one as part of SK and one as a head of the private equity group at Bain & Company, and one at Bain & Company, where he previously worked as a strategy consultant. Thanks, David, for being here. I also have the pleasure of introducing Chris Schlosser from MLS Emerging Ventures. Chris is an experienced leader focusing on building the viewership and distribution of Major League Soccer's streaming service, MLS Season Pass, developing new business and revenue opportunities for MLS and its 30 clubs, and leading MLS's innovation and venture programs. Chris told me he is just the person for anything complicated at the MLS. So if you ever need anything, you can reach out to him. So thank you both for being here. First question is really the idea of the leagues investing in sports is frankly a new feature. And one, I'd love to hear sort of how this came about and maybe any developments over the last few years that you would see.
Sure. At the NBA, I think we had done some equity investment even prior to NBA investment that got launched about 3.5 years ago, initially called NBA Equity. But it was very opportunistic. We had done about 12 deals over a 9-year period where it was more of a partnership that wanted an equity component to the deal itself. But there was no dedicated pool of capital. There was no dedicated pool of team that was working on it. And then finally, at the end of 2021, as the Board of Governors, our owners, had decided that it made sense that at this moment in time that we should be making more strategic investments as we grow the business further. That's when we got launched. And over the past 3.5 years, we've been adding exciting companies to our portfolio, now reaching about 40 portfolio companies, approaching $1 billion or so in asset value under management.
Congratulations on that. That's quite an achievement. Chris, how about you? How did it start at MLS?
Thanks for having me. You know, we saw an opportunity where there were great companies coming through MLS. We were getting to work with incredible young startups. And we think the leagues can do a lot to really accelerate the growth of these startups, whether that's access, whether that's training data, whether that's, promotion and all the things that we can bring to the table. And so as we were, sitting around and thinking about the right opportunities for the league, we really felt like we were leaving opportunity on the table if we didn't have an equity component. And then there's a natural conversation about, all right, well, what does that look like and how is that structured? And so we went through that process. And it's been really fruitful for us, much like the NBA and I think the other leagues. There really is a role to play for the leagues in this space. And we feel really great about the portfolio of companies that we've built over the last 3 or 4 years.
That's great. And how would you think about sort of what investments you're going to make? What is the mandate that you're being tasked with by the league?
For MLS, I'd say, first off, we are not pure play financial investors. We are very much strategic investors. We look for companies in one of generally 3 areas. Either on-field athletic performance, and that can be a broad base of companies. Second for us is fan engagement, whether that's in stadium, at the bar, at home. And third, you may not know this, but over the last couple of years, we built something called MLS Productions. It's one of the largest soccer production houses on the planet. We produce 1,000 live matches a year, hundreds and hundreds of hours of studio content. And so as part of that, we also spent a lot of time looking at interesting startups in media technology that can help accelerate our efforts in that space.
Yeah, for the NBA, similar. We're very much first and foremost a strategic investor. We're looking to make investment into exciting companies that can innovate the game on and off the court. That's always the priority. Obviously, as an investor, I like to joke that you're only a strategic investor until you start losing money. So we want to make sure that we can provide the right returns that we're looking for as an investor. We do similarly look at the areas that Chris has mentioned, but I think for us, we've kind of defined strategic investment pretty narrowly at this time of MBA investments, I guess, progress and venture. So what we do is we focus on making investment into companies that we actively work with. So we want to be an investor into the partners that Chris mentioned that can provide more value to the NBA's product on and off the court, and we feel like we can provide exponential value to them as well, is one of the requirements that we have set up, at least so far, and it's been an exciting journey for us.
So as a financial sort of investor, or at least representing financial investors, this idea of the strategic partnership is a little more challenging for me to comprehend. How do you evaluate if you're looking at, if a company comes to you and says, we're interested in partnering with you, we'd love to give you an equity opportunity, how do you balance that strategic component along with what I presume is also an important side of this, which is making some money from the investment?
Yeah, for us, I think the way we approach it is we heavily rely on our subject matter experts at the NBA that we have at the league level or the team level to figure out if this is one of the clear winners of technology or service providers where we are determined to sign a multi-year, multi-million-dollar long-term relationship with the company. I think that's one of the convictions that we want to see. And then from MBA Investments perspective, we also look at it as an investment. So if our team thinks it's a good investment, we think there is an opportunity for us to provide value to the company, and the company is going to provide equity value for us in the longer term, we get together and try to pitch the investment to our investment committee and then make the investment that way. So it's a very much collaborative effort where our subject matter is providing us the strategic view on the company and our team providing the financial view on it, and then we get together and we want to make sure we're supporting the right type of companies.
I think that's a really good point, because the leagues will do unending number of vendor contracts or supplier deals or whatever that looks like. There's only the very few that pass the further test to say, all right, this is actually a company we think we should have an equity stake in. And we're careful about that because we also want to build long-term partnerships, and it can get complicated if we have an equity stake in one company and then suddenly the league wants to use a different competitor, in our business going forward. And so we always have to balance that. But I think you touched on something that I think is part of the secret sauce of why the leagues can play this role. And that's the embedded expertise we have throughout our business. So if I'm looking at an athlete performance tool, I have a committee of sports science experts that I can go to and talk about. I have medical experts that I can go and talk to. I have production experts. And so that gives us a different view. And then we can separately make the decision on, okay, do we think this is a appropriate equity stage company? Do we think the potential exit is big enough, et cetera, et cetera? But it always starts with, hey, is this actually a really quality product? And what do we think the competitive set is?
And to jump ahead a little bit on my question, but just because you raised it, so that's sort of strategic component and your experts. Are companies getting access to that as part when you invest in them, or is that something that you're using to evaluate your businesses?
So we actually created last year or 2 years ago something we call the MLS Innovation Lab, which was a structured program. We'd always had innovation at the league, but we never had a standing program. And every year we go out, we find 6 to 8 really high-performing startups from around the world. And we bring them in as part of this program, and it's an 8-month program. And we really put them through the paces. They get access to whether it's club staff, league staff, outside experts that we work with, and we really do a lot to help them develop and speed their product to market. I'll give you an example. A company we both work with, Edge Sound Research, which does AI sound processing and AI mixing for back-end broadcasts. It's one of the first companies to really bring AI into the audio side of the broadcast. We've spent 8 months with this company testing and refining their capabilities. So if we're going to spend that much time and energy, it only makes sense that we think about, is there some upside return for us as part of that?
Yeah, so we also have a very similar program called NBA Launchpad, which is in our 5th year. We just closed out applications, always looking for most exciting companies that can come into our portfolio and partnership. But on top of that, I think what we try to look at is how much outside value can we provide. So it's, we have a lot of partners that works with the NBA that are excellent companies, but doesn't always mean they're the best type of investment that we can provide outside value for. So if you're already a multi-billion-dollar company that's doing really well and we have a partnership, maybe the NBA partnership is an important one, but we're not outsizing, providing value, then maybe it's not an investment or an equity relationship that we're looking for. But if you're more of an earlier stage company, we're an important partner of yours that we think we can provide value, I think that's how we approach investments.
That's really helpful. On the sort of approach to a company and sort of providing your value well, actually, let me back up. You have a lot of companies that are coming to you. I would think almost every emerging company out there that is involved in sports would love to have the MLS or NBA as a partner, and particularly as an equity holder. I'm sure within the application process that's a little more formalized, but you guys don't have huge teams. How are you actually evaluating these businesses? How do you think, how do companies approach you? How do you manage that process?
A couple things. First of all, you're right. We get inundated with companies from all sides. We spend a lot of time trying to identify proactively what are the areas of interest or things that we're actually going to try to accomplish over the next 12 or 18 months. And we use that as an initial screening process for the areas that we want to play. Because it's hard to swim upstream if the company or the league isn't interested in a particular topic. It's not 100% because every once in a while you get blown away by a founder or a team. But generally we try to really identify those opportunity areas and then use that as our sourcing rubric. And then once the companies come in, we'll go do an initial screen with our ventures team. And then the best of the best will pass off to the subject matter experts for further review.
Yeah, I think for us, it's subject matter experts first. So whenever we have a company that comes our way that is excited to do something with us or wants investment from the NBA investment team, we actually look and think about, is there a use case for this technology or is there a partnership opportunity with this company? And the way we do it, we play the gateway role for the startup ecosystem or the venture community to be able to connect to the right subject matter experts and business units inside the NBA. So we make the introductions. If we think they're a great company and an interesting one that could innovate, help us innovate, then they'll have the conversation with the commercial team, potentially build a commercial partnership. As that gets along, they bring us back in and think about, hey, is this one where we're just going to have a partnership with the company, or should we have an equity component to it? And does that equity component actually help this partnership? So there have been times where we're just bringing these startups in and help them business develop inside the NBA, which I think is a 90 out of 100 if you give scores. If we do have an equity component to it, it's 100 out of 100, but we're happy with the 90 out of 100 outcome, given that we're bringing in innovative companies into the NBA ecosystem that can help us provide the best fan experience possible.
So great segue to my next question, which is, you've invested money, and I realize exits can be challenging in a minority investor, but how do you measure whether something has been successful? Is it a survey of fan experience? Is it seeing a better product on the field? What is success? Because it's not just going to be that the investment is marked at 3x for you.
So I think, and this is a really interesting topic that we debate a lot internally too. But job number one for us is to grow the league. And whether that's grow attendance, grow viewership on television, grow just general awareness and interest in the league or performance on the field, that is job number one for all of us. And so if we can help accelerate that process, that's a great starting point. Then on the equity side, of course, we look at our portfolio and we're constantly evaluating, where are we, how do we think each of the companies are performing, what's our return. That's an important component. But frankly, if we had a company that is meaningfully impacting the league and helping us accelerate, and the investment was, not a home run, I think we'd still think that was a success from a league standpoint, given the opportunity to influence the trajectory of the league overall.
Yeah, very, very similar. I think every company that we invest has different kind of KPIs that we look at. For example, if we're investing in a company that helps with injury prevention, the way that we look at the success for that investment obviously besides the financial, is about, is it really helping us prevent injuries? If we're looking at a company that's going to help us collect fan data and understand them and be able to do better marketing and hyper-personalize their experience, are we doing that with this company? Is our spending with them increasing? Are we thinking of them as a more important partner of ours? That's the way that I would measure success. So every investment, I think we look at it differently, but ultimately, obviously, again, like I said, we do want to bring returns that make sense for us.
That injury prevention is a great example, because what's the value of keeping one of our star players on the field for another game, another 2 games? And think about the return of that player, from a ticket sales or media standpoint, not missing that game. And so, it is really hard to just justify the one point, and that's why you have to have the more holistic view on all these partnerships.
As a parent of 2 daughters playing sports, I think injury prevention is great, so let's keep that going. Maybe to take the other side of this, if you're advising a startup who is looking to bring the league on as a partner or as an investor or both, what are some things that they should absolutely have ready before they approach you? And I guess you can tackle that from the sort of launch pad and innovation strategy, or as a later stage.
Yeah, I think for us, we look at maybe 3 things to be kind of a requirement if we had to come up with one. One, the most obvious one, is the NBA needs to have a use case. Again, we got to think about, how are you going to help the NBA innovate? Is it on the court? Is it off the court? How do you envision that happening? And I think that is the first and foremost most important thing. So if you can't pinpoint what that looks like, I think it's very hard for us to do anything with investments. On the second front, we, as an investor at the NBA, we're a minority investor. We're not thinking that this is us leading a deal, like setting valuation. Those type of things are not our forte, for example, at least at this moment in time. So we want to be investing with the best. So we want to see a company that has got an investment from a strong financial investor, and NBA's role is to play the strong, strategic investor role alongside that financial investor that is helping the company in different ways that maybe the NBA has limitations on helping. And then lastly, we have liked and really been grateful to companies that have big visions of what they're trying to do. So the sports-specific use case may be small, but if they can see how this can expand beyond sports and become much more exciting for even besides the realm that they're playing at least this moment in time, I think as an investment team, we get very excited.
I think to build on 2 things you said there. One, we are not great at taking just a founder with an idea and helping them take that first step. It's really important for us to see something of a product. It doesn't have to be a fully fledged final product, but you have to come to us with something that we can deploy, something that we can test, something that we can wrap our arms around. If it's just you and an idea, that's great, but you're probably better off in some other startup ecosystem programs to get going. And then once you have that product, we'd love to help you test it and refine it and take it to the next level. And then second, on the last point you made there, I think it is really interesting because there are a lot of startups that are very focused solely on selling into professional sports. And that can be an interesting market, but it is hard to justify true equity type investment and returns if your entire market is just, I want to sell into pro sports. It's possible and it happens, and we've seen some success stories, but that is a tough, when I put my pure investment hat on, that can be a really tough story. If there's a broader market, hey, this can have application across all of youth sports, or there's a retail component, or maybe there's other industries that are kind of similar where there's use case, that becomes a more interesting pure play investment story for us.
Yeah, it's interesting as you think about that, the market below the professional sports teams is incredibly large. And I guess, do you view that as part of your mandate to try to increase that market size and increase the progress as to create that player development? Is that sort of big part of your thesis?
Player development is critically important for MLS. We've launched MLS Next, which is our academy system. There's now 50,000 kids in 160-something academies all across the country. It's something we spend a lot of time on, but we're also trying to figure out how do we make it easier for parents in the youth sports world? How do we make travel less? How do we make the cost less? And so that's a little bit of a double-edged sword, because I can't tell you how many startups walk in the door and say, "Oh, we'll just charge the parents another couple bucks, and they'll happily pay it." And they may be right, but ultimately, from a strategic standpoint, we want to try to make youth sports as accessible as possible, and so those two things can run at counter purposes.
Yeah, so shout out to one of our portfolio companies that's going to announce their investment in a couple of days, called FastBreak.ai, which is actually trying to solve that issue where with scheduling, helping youth sports schedule it correctly so that when you're going all the way across the country, you're not playing the town next door, which I think youth sports parents know that actually happens. So, and then trying to come up with the ways we can make it easier for them to do these travel sports and really cultivate the competitiveness as well as player development. We also make investments into international sports angles for that development as well. An investment for NBA is global, so we look at Chinese deals if it makes sense. We have European startups as well in our portfolio to cultivate more fan bases over there and youth that would want to play sports and basketball.
So we touched on youth sports, but maybe just to ask, what are some other industries, verticals, technologies that you've been looking at recently that may be interesting? You don't have to tell me secret investments that are coming up. I understand.
I think I have to say AI. I think I'm mandated on a panel like this to say AI, but ultimately we are looking at a lot of what I'll call point solutions for AI, not the big large language models, but how do we actually create deployable solutions using AI? How do we translate our broadcasts into 108 different languages? We talked about Edge Sound. How do we automate the audio mix for our broadcasts? How do we think about content production and clipping and all of those things using AI? How do we think about athlete data and performance using AI? So there's a lot of what I'll say, those end solutions that are deploying AI in interesting ways, and I think we're just getting started on that trajectory.
Yeah, for surely AI, we're looking at a lot of things that Chris already mentioned, translation, editing. We're even looking at piracy and deepfakes. I'm sure you've seen already many deepfakes of our players and coaches online where you're not sure if this is real or not. Sometimes they're actually real. But we're trying to figure out how do we protect the brand association as much as possible. Right now it's fun and good, but at a certain point, this may become a bigger issue for the NBA, so we're testing several companies there. I think another scheme for us that has been very top of mind since we took over our app operations at the NBA from TNT and Turner is around hyper-personalization. How do we understand our fan base better? How do we make sure that they have a one-on-one experience? I think David Haber, our CFO, mentioned it, so that they have what they want on their screen that is much relevant. I think advertisement, to a certain degree even, people don't like advertisements that are not related to you. But if it becomes related and you can actually enjoy it, it becomes information that you enjoy. So trying to understand our fan base and delivering that, I think we're looking for technology that could help us on those fronts.
Sounds great. Can't wait to see that. Chris, I did want to ask, anything interesting coming up aside from the big World Cup next year, which I'm excited. Any investments that could be leading towards that, or anything interesting you're working on?
I'd say stay tuned. We're enrolling the third cohort of our innovation lab, and before the end of the year, you'll see us come out with some really exciting names in that space.
That's great. I guess I got a couple minutes here, so I'll keep going. On the types of investments you do, you guys said that you do mostly minority investments. Are you flexible across any investments as far as size of investment or control or anything in particular that you're unwilling to do or that you have to have in your investments?
Yeah, I think at the NBA, at least for now, we've kind of defined it pretty rigidly to a certain degree because we are in the early stages, first quarter of what we're doing right now. So we've been focused on making investments into companies, A, that has a strategic angle and use case, 2, where we're holding maybe 2.5% to 5% ownership up to 10% ownership. And then Series A to C is where we primarily focus on because we want to see them having seen a little bit of product market fit, and then we can use them. But also, if you're a multi-billion-dollar unicorn, even though we do think we can help them, it's not the core of what we do at the investment team.
I'd say it's pretty similar. We're stage agnostic to a point. We've written small checks, we've written larger checks. It really depends on the situation and how strategic the opportunity is. We are a minority investor. I guess in theory we would take a majority stake, but that would be a pretty special, I think, very soccer-focused opportunity for us. And then I think the other thing is you asked about it in some of the prep calls. We will take a board observer seat or a board seat. We are open to those kind of situations. It has to be the right governance, right opportunity. But we think from a board standpoint, we like being part of that so that we can help provide guidance and get some insight into where the company's going.
That's great. Well, the countdown is clicking here, so I'll end there. And I just want to thank David and Chris for this time. It was really great to have you on the panel.
Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage